Oftentimes we're not correct about those audiences. I think that it's really important for startups to have a process where you can very quickly and easily test the rigor behind your thought process, and if it isn't correct, that's totally fine, because that's just another piece of data that helps you then take that next step and then start to drive things in a more effective direction.
Today on Strategy Shorts, I'm joined by Pete Newsome. Now, Pete is a marketing technologist and he's the GM for a marketing agency called Fractal, who are all about resourcing, helping companies with financing, really coming up with marketing solutions for all sorts of different brands. But before I talk any longer and make a total mess of what Fractal does and who you are, Pete, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Fantastic. Thanks, Dan. So as you said, I consider myself a marketing technologist. So I straddle both the worlds of marketing and tech. And I'm the general manager at Fractal. So what we do is we work with a lot of early stage startups, not-for-profits, and small businesses that are struggling to find who their audience actually are. So we come up with some very tailored marketing strategies and techniques that we apply in an agile marketing way, in an agile marketing framework, to go through and very quickly and iteratively test messaging and find the right people within the smallest budget, without having to be too burdensome on the startup founders, and basically help them go from 0 to 1.
Amazing. Now, I've been involved in the launch of 5 startups in my career, and I just know how challenging it can be to figure out. People talk about avatars and ideal customer profiles and target audiences, and they're easy kind of catchphrases to say you need to do X. But actually, if you're starting up, if you're getting started, if you're an NGO who's looking for a new crowd, actually coming up with the answer to those questions is really, really difficult. So I think the work that you're doing sounds really, really important.
I'll throw in really quickly. Uh, Oftentimes, we're not correct about those audiences as well. We can come up with what we think sounds incredible and feels very aligned, but when we go to market, those people that we've spent all of that time, building personas around or profiles around, they may not be the ones that actually start clicking through. So I think that it's really important for startups to have a process where you can very quickly and easily test, the rigor behind your thought process. And if it isn't correct, that's totally fine, because that's just another piece of data that helps you then take that next step and then start to, drive things in a more effective direction.
I think as well, a big challenge for brands with smaller budgets or NGOs, not for profits, is that you're constantly encouraged to innovate, to test and learn, experiment, try some stuff and see what works. But if actually your resources are very limited or your time is very limited, or you just haven't got those kind of investments that you can make, that's not necessarily very helpful, because you've got to iterate and experiment with things that are likely to yield some forward momentum or some meaningful results that you can build on. And so that's why I love what you guys are doing, because I think helping people to make informed choices and experiment well with some useful suggestions, it's just so key. But I'm really interested in your background as well, because yes, you're a general manager now and you're an employee, but your career history is a little interesting, because some people go through an interesting career and then one day they decide, right, I'm going to start my own thing, go on my own journey, start my own business. But you flipped the script, and out of college, you said, I'm not going to become an employee. I'm just going to start my own thing. So 23, starting your own business. Tell us that story.
So I was working for an internet company at the time, and was quite unenthused at how they were looking after their clients and their customers. And naively, at the age of 23, I didn't really know any better, but I just had this drive that I could service these clients more effectively. I could provide a better quality of service, and at the core of it, I just really wanted to be able to help people, and I felt that within that organization that I'd only been in, for 12 months, I felt that it wasn't really helping people. So I decided to set up my own business, and so I set up my own web hosting agency, which then expanded into web design and web development. And then that was also, because this was quite a while ago now, um, that was also very early on in the days of SEO. And so I then started my own little digital marketing agency, and then ran that and managed that for over 15 years. I think it was 17, um, 18 in total. And then I had an opportunity to sell the business. So I exited, and then I found myself in a really, really interesting situation, because I had, for most of my, or all of my professional life, I had always worked for myself. So I had to adjust and then find my way back into the workforce, which, I was coming at it in some ways with, an experience level of, or a professional experience level of someone who was probably in their early 20s, in terms of exposure to, the much larger end of town, the much bigger businesses. So what that actually led me down the path of was working with startups and doing mentoring and everything, because I found that the years of experience and knowledge that I had the opportunity to build up, I was then able to then pass on some of those lessons to those businesses, and then I went down a few other different paths and different rabbit holes, and then ended up where I am now as the GM.
Well, there we go. Well, welcome back to the workforce. And I'm sure all those startups that you've been able to support and mentor have really, really appreciated the fact that you didn't pursue such a traditional career route and end up just being part of a machine. That kind of external point of view, that outside perspective, I'm sure has been invaluable to many. So coming on to the kind of the more practical part of the episode, we love to give people practical things that they can take away and try, things that they can implement as soon as the episode finishes. And one of the things that we're going to focus on here is the audience discovery process, making sure that you can reach the right people with the right message, where to find them, who they are. And I know that you've got a process or a framework that you'd like to share with us to help with that. But before we dive into the nuts and bolts of what that is, give me a sense of who you're really speaking to, like who's going to really benefit from this approach you're going to share.
So this approach is really targeted, as I said, towards the startup founders. So we deal directly with the founders, and it's aimed at those startups that haven't quite found market traction. They've got a great idea. They think that it sounds really good. They've run it past their friends, their family, and everyone seems very much in support of this, but they haven't tested it with the market. So we've come up with a few different ways to help those founders start to test their ideas without having to build out massive amounts of content, or invest a lot of time and money into going out and doing market research.
Awesome. Well, it sounds really, really interesting. I'll let you dive straight in, but if I've got any questions, I will let you know. But take it away.
Not a problem. So I suppose there's two parts to this. So for organizations so for startups that don't know who their competitors really are, if it's something that's very new to the market, but it speaks to different business problems or different topics that have been explored, be that spoken about on other websites, on other news websites. We go through and basically on social platforms, we'll find these pieces of content that might already be out there. And we go through and get the client to share those, or we share that content on their behalf to see what information actually gains a level of traction. Now, this isn't them actually developing or writing up any of these articles, but it's going, here's the business problem that we're solving. And we found these different pieces of content that already exist out there, and then we help them share them around. And we might go through and build out some audiences within social media that we think um, that particular topic would appeal to, and we look to see what gains traction, and if we find that there are certain pieces that do gain traction, we'll then go through and go through a process of writing our own versions of that, because sometimes it's hard to tell if someone sees something and because it was published in, on the New York Times, it might be that it's the reputation of the media source that got people's attention and not the actual topic itself. So we then go through and write our own version of that particular article, of that particular piece, which we then go through and promote on the client's website, and we go through and we see if that gets a similar type of traction, and we can then build it out from there. And so that's if there's content that already exists out there. Another strategy that we'll often use is if you know who your competitors are, so you know that you're revolutionizing in this space, you know that the types of clients that you would like would potentially be browsing these specific websites. We'll sometimes set up a Google display campaign. So we'll set up some Google ads where we'll set up some really simple display advertising. The reason that we go with the display approach is because it's really, really cost effective. It's far cheaper than search. And it also means that you don't have to get the right keywords or any of those, because you can build out an audience on Google that says, find people who frequent these types of websites. And you can put in a list of 20 competitors' websites and then go through and design a few simple little Canva tiles that, MREC frame or a skyscraper. And you go through and put some messaging on that that speaks about the business problem that your startup is trying to solve. And we see if we get people to click on those, when they're browsing their favorite news website or browsing places where those ads exist. So that's a simple approach, but we make sure that the website, the client's website, is tagged up with all the necessary metapixels, the LinkedIn insight tags, so that when we do get those people clicking through to the client's website, what we're actually doing is we're starting to build up an audience that we can then create lookalikes and remarket to on the social platforms. And this is very, very powerful, because at this stage, we haven't actually entered anything into Meta saying that we're looking for people who are of this particular demographic or that live in this area that are interested in a topic like bicycles, or we haven't put any of this in. We've let Google do all of the heavy lifting because it's found people based on those competitor websites, and then Meta using its pixel and its way of looking at the 40,000 different touch points and different things that it can see in a digital footprint that you and I probably can't even imagine, with the way that we sort of try and categorize people. It can then go through and build out and goes, oh, you want to find these people? We know exactly who they are. And then we can build lookalikes and expand out that audience from there. And what we found is that for very niche industries and for industries that that aren't clearly defined or have limitations to what you can actually target on social media. So, for instance, one of the clients that we worked with, they were revolutionizing in the clinical trial space. And obviously on social media, you can't, and even with Google, you can't be seen to be recruiting for clinical trials. But we were able to use this technique based on other websites and things like that to actually build out this whole audience of people that were interested in the topic, but we didn't have to go through and break it down into any custom audiences on the platforms themselves.
This is such an interesting approach because there's a couple of things that are happening as far as I can tell. One is you're leveraging the various different algorithms available to really zero in on the right consumers. The kind of data that you'll never have access to that level of data. Like we're talking millions of data points. And the way in is to use Well, one example you've given is to use Google Display Ads because you can build a slightly more generic audience, or you can be a bit more natural language with how you build your audience. You then review who's actually then engaging with those display ads, and then you take that content in. So you're using one algorithm there to kind of help you reduce your target area. Then you're using that data within Meta to really then start to zero in on who those ideal customers are. I think that is super genius.
Off the back of that, we'll then apply that additional approach where we're then testing out articles or testing out media posts that we can do. And again, without the client having to actually invest any time in actually building those out, to then test to see if that audience that we have found through Google, is doing the right thing and is working. And all of this can be done on Meta. It can be done for a couple of dollars a day. And a display campaign on Google can be as little as $5 to $10 to actually start to get enough traffic to start to build out what that pixel can pick up.
Yeah, I loved what you were saying at the start of that previous section around leveraging content that already exists. Because I think if you're starting a business, or you're thinking of a pivot, or you're trying to start something new, actually figuring out what are the valuable things you can talk about that people can engage with is super difficult. So I love that approach of using existing content, sharing existing content, maybe offering a bit of commentary about your opinion, perhaps. But I think that's such a great way to see, okay, what is sticking? What's piquing people's interest in the space or the category that I'm trying to grow and move into? We love to finish every episode with something practical for people to take away and try. It may be that which we've just discussed, but I'm wondering if you had another thought about where people can take action today. Like, what's the starting point if you're going to start moving into this audience discovery process and begin to zero in on your ideal consumer?
Look, I think that the simplest things that you could do, like you just mentioned, it's anytime that you see an article that speaks to a problem that you're solving, share it around and don't be afraid to share content that is outside of what you've written. I think that a lot of people think that they can only share their own content, or, there's something disingenuous or something that, like, I don't want to steer people in this other direction or away from my own website. But when you're in that early stage, it's actually really valuable. So I think that that's a really, really good starting point, and something that you can quite easily execute today, really.
Pete, we are coming into land and we're just about done for time in today's episode. But such great value, such great insights, really simple things that people can begin to explore. So thank you so much. And thank you for making some time for the show. Let's speak again soon.
Thanks, Dan.